A cloud of suspicion surrounds the deaths of Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman and his wife, whose bodies were found in
Hollywood has always been a place of legends, but few actors have left a mark as deep as Gene Hackman. But even in his final years, his story was far from over. His sudden and unexplained death shocked the world, leaving behind questions, secrets, and a chilling revelation from his closest friend. Join us as we discuss what Gene Hackman's best friend Dustin Hoffman meant when he said he's not who you think he is. Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman together, although most people would never think of such a thing. Hollywood is a cruel place, and genuine friendships are rare. Fame, competition, and the relentless pursuit of success often destroy even the strongest bonds. However, some friendships are built differently. Some are formed in moments of struggle in tiny cold apartments with barely enough money for food, on rooftops where dreams are spoken into the night, and in long conversations filled with laughter, doubt, and survival. One such friendship was between Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman, two completely different actors who started their journey together and, despite everything, remained connected by the past they shared. Their story began in 1956 at Pasadena Playhouse, a well-known acting school in California. Dustin Hoffman was a young man who had tried medicine and music but had never felt truly passionate about anything until he walked into his first acting class. For the first time in his life, he could focus entirely on something, and that realization changed everything. He was not particularly tall, nor did he fit the conventional Hollywood image. Later in his career, he often joked that he looked like a rat on screen, but he had something that set him apart: an intense energy and an undeniable talent. Gene Hackman, on the other hand, was a completely different kind of man. At 27, he had already served in the Marines and had a tough noon's demeanor. Unlike Dustin, he did not hesitate in his career choice. He knew he wanted to be an actor, even though few believed in him. He was older than most of the other students and had a serious, determined attitude. When he first saw Dustin, he was immediately struck by how unusual he was. Dustin stood in the middle of the room wearing a corduroy vest without a shirt underneath, paired with matching corduroy pants. Gene later said that he immediately thought Dustin was a strange little guy, but there was something about him that intrigued him. Despite their differences, they formed a connection. However, their time at Pasadena Playhouse was short-lived, especially for Gene. The school had a rigid grading system that ranked students in categories such as movement, voice, projection, gestures, interpretation, and attitude. Gene did not conform to these expectations, and after just 3 months he was expelled. Instead of giving up, he decided to take a bold step. He packed his bags and moved to New York to pursue acting on his own. 2 years later, Dustin followed him. When he arrived in New York, he had only $50 in his pocket and no idea what to do next. The city overwhelmed him with its size, noise, and pace. Lost and struggling, he sought out Gene, who let him sleep on the floor of his small kitchen. It was supposed to be temporary, just a few nights, but it stretched into 3 weeks. Eventually, Gene and his wife Faye realized they could not keep hosting him indefinitely and decided it was time to push him toward independence. Gene took Dustin out to look for apartments, which led to him moving in with another struggling actor, Robert Duvall. The two of them ended up in a 3-bedroom, 6th-floor walk-up apartment on 109th Street and Broadway. It was not just a home, it was more like a hostel for aspiring actors and opera singers who were trying to survive in New York. Struggles, survival, and brotherhood. Life in that apartment was anything but easy. None of Them had steady work and they took on any job they could find just to make ends meet. Dustin, Gene, and Robert worked as typists for the Yellow Pages, moved furniture, worked at pharmacies, and even took shifts as doorman. At one point Gene got a job transporting valuable artwork, but his carelessness nearly resulted in a disaster when he accidentally pierced a Picasso lithograph with a broomstick. The owner stood there horrified, watching the priceless artwork get destroyed. Despite the daily struggles, there was an undeniable joy in those years. Many nights they climbed onto the rooftop of their building and played drums with Dustin on the bongos and Gene on the congas. They idolized Marlon Brando and spent hours talking about his performances. These rooftop sessions were not just about music, they were about dreaming, about believing that one day they would make it. Acting classes were another source of entertainment. Dustin later recalled how they were obsessed with meeting women, and acting schools were full of models. Sometimes a woman would approach and suggest rehearsing a love scene, and he and his friends would eagerly agree. However, the most bizarre moments often came from Robert. Dustin used to tell stories about how after a successful night with a woman he would wake up the next morning and take a shower with her, only for Robert to suddenly walk in completely naked, introduce himself as their roommate, and start a conversation. In tragedy didn't end there. His wife Betsy Arakawa had also been discovered lifeless. Even more chilling, one of their beloved dogs had died as well. It was supposed to be just another quiet morning in the vast landscapes of New Mexico, where Gene had spent his later years away from the flashing lights of Hollywood. A maintenance worker arrived at his property for a routine check. Expecting nothing unusual, the house, always peaceful, stood still under the warm desert sun, but something felt different. There was no movement, no sound. Nothing. Knocking on the door brought no response. The worker hesitated, then knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Concerned, he called security, and soon a guard arrived to help. Together they walked around the house, peering through the windows. Everything looked normal until the guard stopped suddenly, his eyes widening in horror. Inside, motionless figures lay on the floor. The guard fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking as he dialed 911. Moments later, sirens pierced through the silence, and deputies from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office arrived there. Flashing lights bathed the quiet property in an unsettling glow. What they found inside only deepened the mystery. S body was in the bathroom near a small heater. An open medicine bottle lay beside her, but there were no signs of struggle, no wounds, nothing that suggested foul play nearby. One of their dogs lay curled up, lifeless, as if it had simply drifted off to sleep, but strangely 2 other dogs were still alive, one pacing nervously, the other standing guard over Betsy's still form. Then they found Gene. He was in a room fed with shoes, a cane, and a pair of glasses rested beside him as though he had dropped them just before collapsing. The room was undisturbed, nothing was out of place. It was as if time had simply stopped for him, just as it had for Betsy and their dog. No blood, no overturned furniture, no broken glass, no sign of forced entry. It was an eerie scene, one that left investigators searching for answers. Unsettling discoveries in Gone Hackman's home. If you're interested in how Dustin reacted to the death of his best friend, stay with us a little longer, because before that we'll mention some other strange findings by the police that only complicated the case. Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa had lived a quiet and private life in Santa Fe, far from Hollywood and the constant media attention. Those who knew them described their days as peaceful, filled with simple routine. means, and a love for solitude. There had never been any signs of trouble, no reason to believe anything was wrong. That's why their sudden and unexplained deaths shocked not only their friends and neighbors but also the entire film industry. No one, especially not Dustin Hoffman, could have imagined such a tragic and mysterious ending. The first theory investigators considered was carbon monoxide poisoning. It seemed like the most logical explanation. An invisible and deadly gas leaking into the home, silently taking their lives. The symptoms matched, and even one of their dogs had died, strengthening the suspicion. Fire department officials and gas company specialists rushed to the scene, scanning every inch of the house for traces of the poison, but their tests revealed nothing. There was no leak, no faulty heater, nothing in the air that could have been the silent killer. The theory collapsed, leaving detectives grasping for answers. As they searched for another cause, they found something just as disturbing. The house contained a large number of prescription medications. Some were placed neatly inside cabinets, while others were scattered across countertops, some bottles even lying open. Among them were pills for blood pressure, thyroid issues, and general pain relief. Investigators carefully documented every bottle, noting that some had barely been touched while others were partially emptied. It raised new questions. Was it an accidental overdose, a lethal mix of medications, or something else entirely? Then came the discovery that changed everything. Gene Hackman's pacemaker, a device that didn't just regulate his heart but also recorded vital data, was removed for examination. Specialists extracted the information, and what they found sent a chill through the investigation. The last recorded heartbeat from Gene Hackman was on February 17, 9 days before his body was discovered. That revelation altered the entire timeline. It meant Gene had been dead for over a week while the house remained undisturbed. But even more disturbing was the question of Betsy. Had she died at the same time, or had she been alone in that house for days, slowly fading away, with no one to help Dustin Hoffman on his best friend? And until all the tests are done, it will be some time, and it is clear that by then we will be left without answers to most of these questions. But while investigators search for the truth, Hollywood is still struggling to process the lost. Tributes have poured in from all over the world, but one voice stood out among the rest. Dustin Hoffman, Hackman's closest friend for over 60 years, finally broke his silence, and when he did, he shocked everyone. It's time to tell everything, he said, his voice heavy with emotion. He's not who you think he is. Maybe he led a quiet and withdrawn life and kept secrets, but Gene Hackman was full of life, much more than anyone I know. Dustin spoke not just of Gene's greatness as an actor, but of the passion that made him unforgettable. He described him as a man of restless energy, someone who never did anything halfway, whether he was perfecting a role, discussing history, or obsessing over a book he had just read. Gene threw himself into everything with the same intensity. He was fascinated by the smallest details, able to recall obscure facts about architecture, war strategy, or old Hollywood scandals. Beyond the screen, he had a sharp, often biting sense of humor, the kind that could catch people off guard. He loved the thrill of competition, whether it was a game of chess, a round of poker, or even a simple bet on how long a director would take to set up a shot. He had a deep love for classic cars, restoring them with the same precision he brought to his performances. That was who he was. Never just an actor, but a man who lived life with a quiet but undeniable fire. If you could ask Dustin Hoffman one thing about Gone Hackman, what would it be? Let us know in the comments and subscribe to our channel for more.